This is the Kyle Malnati Show. Our podcast provides an opportunity to expand your knowledge, and it's our goal to make real estate investing more approachable to everyone. Each episode, we tap into the mindset of real estate experts and share their stories. Live from Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood, you are watching the Kyle Malnati Show, where multifamily matters. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and we are so appreciative of Stewart Title for allowing us to broadcast today. We're broadcasting from the office of Chris Waters. My guest today is Theresa Bradley-Banta. Theresa, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. I'm excited for an awesome show. So Theresa has been in the multifamily investing business for over 10 years. She's been a consultant, she's been an investor, she's done deals as small as $50,000, single family homes, all the way up to $9 million. And she's raised money, she's done syndications, I mean, you've done it all. So this will be a lot of fun. Theresa, tell me a little bit about your real estate story. How did you get started in the business, and really where did you start understanding about rental real estate?
I became a landlord pretty much by default. We had a home in the Washington Park DU area.
Okay.
And my husband and I were both self-employed and realized we were paying off somebody else's investment property through our rental offices. And so we bought a large Victorian in downtown Denver, and we kept our former home as a rental. So that became a crash course in landlording for me. We rented two girls, our students, on the women's DU soccer team.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So you started with college rentals, and if you've got a property that used to be your primary residence, and all of a sudden you're renting it out to people, you know a lot more about that. You feel real comfortable operating that as an investment. And a lot of clients, a lot of people that watch this show have mentioned that they owned a property, maybe it was a condo or a small house, and then they make that next move up and they say, well, my little entrepreneurial self, I want to keep that and rent it. And that's a lot of times, like you said, by default, you become a landlord. Now, that was your crash course.
Yes.
There's probably some things you learned in that process that you'd say, I'd never do that again. And you eventually sold that property, but being a landlord by default, what are some things you know now that you may not have done when you first started doing real estate investing?
I would caution that you have your documents,
Okay.
ducks in a row,
Yeah.
in terms of the paperwork that you're entering in a relationship with your tenants, and that you learn that it's to the tenant's benefit as well, to have that working relationship as landlord-tenant. You're not the money taker and they're just the tenant. It's very important to support those tenants and give them a safe, clean place to live.
Yeah,
And-
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and you talked about this when we were prepping for our show, that we've always got this question about what's the purpose of multifamily investing and what's the reason behind it. And you had talked about the tenant relationship, and that it's not just an exchange of money. These buildings that you operate, they really have a life behind them. They seem like inanimate objects, but really the tenants make the buildings work. And so talk a little bit more about that, about ushering a good relationship with your tenants. And
I could probably best illustrate it with that first crash course in landlording. Those tenants of ours were students on the women's soccer team. And having never been a landlord, I almost came in as a role of, I really wanted to nurture and take care of those tenants.
you were like the den mother.
I was. And so I think that just set the tone for wanting to treat my residents that way from then on out.
Sure.
And we did smart things like have the parents co-sign leases and just things that, for student housing that are things that you should do. And of course I learned those on the job. But I really think that set the tone for realizing that any property is a community, and particularly when you get into large multifamily.
Yeah,
They are a living, breathing environment.
And you mentioned that these buildings have their own community within them, and then they interact within the larger community.
Right.
So you can tell really quickly if someone's a great, cognizant landlord and that takes good care. And then you can also tell when someone is the slumlord. And it shows really well, and it reflects in both the way the building looks, the curb appeal, but also the tenants that rent there. Because people that are educated and people that want nice things don't want to go live in someone's building that's under repaired. So right. I think that was a smart lesson to learn from the beginning. And the other thing that I heard also is that you understood the type of investment you had. you had at that point a college rental, and you said, there's some things I need to do to modify this that you may not do if you were doing senior housing.
That's
or
right.
if you were renting in Capitol Hill with, maybe tenants in their first job. So you modify to what fits your type of investment.
Yep, that's so true.
So the next question I have for you is, what happens when real estate investors run into problems? You're a coach, you're a mentor, and I think that what ends up occurring is we learn so much by having mistakes and having issues. And so as you have this mentor-mentee relationship that we've talked about in your consulting business, how do you handle that? How do you walk alongside folks and give them valuable mentoring? And then also, have you had mentors in your own life?
Yes, I have had mentors, and I think I became a mentor much as my mentors were with me.
Okay.
I hired 2 mentors when I decided to buy an apartment building. One works solely with my psychology around jumping into multi-million-dollar deals. And ironically, what he had me do is run out and start making offers on properties. So I was like, just go do it. Right,
yeah.
Because you're not going to learn about the market, you're not going to learn about the type of properties or the baseline financials on similar properties within a market. You just must get out there and do that.
Right.
So I actually mentor that way as well. My other mentor helped me learn deal analysis, the underwriting of any potential prospective property, and then we also coached on putting together partnerships, syndicating a deal. Mm-hmm. So that involved how to deal with partners. And the best thing he told me was, when you look at a deal, the first thing you want to make sure is that there's enough to make a partner happy. And then the second question is there enough left over for it to be worth my while? Which I just thought was extraordinary advice, because again, I was thinking partners versus me first.
Yes.
And then he helped with doing the operating agreements and everything that protected that partnership and all within it.
Yeah, and any good partnership that I've ever seen, the main partner always thinks about all of their investors first. If they're a good partner, is how can I serve? Because I'm the expert here, and you eat last is what ends up happening. It's like a good cook.
Yeah.
You're cooking in the kitchen, and you're feeding the kids, you're feeding your spouse, and then you eat last. And that's just what happens when you're a good servant. And that seems like kind of a funny word to use, but the reality is when you're in that type of relationship, you're serving the fiduciary responsibility to your clients, which are your partners.
Yes.
And that's a huge piece of advice. Bowman Key, one of our prior guests, had mentioned that real estate investing is a very simple business. It's all about the delta. It's all about the difference between what my income is and my expenses are. And for you, that advice that you received at a very young part of your career, you say, okay, it's all about, is there enough for the partners, and then is there enough for me outside of what our normal operating expenses are going to be.
Yeah.
So I also want to touch on a topic with mentors. You hired mentors, hired coaches, and I think a lot of people, when they think of mentoring, there's some informal mentoring where you've got someone that's older than you that wants to impart some wisdom. Maybe it's a working relationship. I had great mentors when I first got my start working in real estate, people that gave me such a leg up on figuring things out because I got to learn through their experience. But I've also worked with coaches. I've had a career coach, I've had a life coach, and you've hired some folks, and I think that's a very interesting topic to talk about, is that at some point when you get into a niche, you may need to hire someone. And so what's that like for you? You do some formal coaching. You've also become an author, you've got a website, you've got all these things that you do so people can interact with you on a formal basis.
And so the question is?
Well, so the question is, why did you choose to use a professional coach as opposed to just find someone that was doing real estate investing? And then also, you provide that service now as well. And so where's the value proposition? I know that there is one, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Well, and it's interesting that when you hear in the industry mentor, people do go to free mentor,
Sure.
the person retiring and leaving, and maybe I'll get their properties. That works. It absolutely works. The mentor that worked with me on deal analysis and working with partners told me that if you look at a clock, what you know about real estate investing can be demonstrated by the clock face. Like the hour from noon to 2 is what you know. From 2 to 4 is what you know don't know. And from 4 all the way around back up to noon again is what you don't know.
Interesting.
And that was enough to put great caution on me, but it also made me realize that having a mentor was a must.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know, it was so frightening to think there's things I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that volume of what I don't know. And with the formal mentoring relationship, as opposed to just hooking up with the person that might be retiring or something, that person is focused on you alone, working on meeting you where you're at, your goals, and has a vested interest in your success.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because you can do the informal, and there can be great value in that, but when you've hired someone, there's this exchange where you say, I'm intentionally hiring you, and then they're saying, I'm going to impart this wisdom that I have.
That's right.
And usually for someone to be justified to be a professional coach, other people have paid for their services, and they're very, very good at what they do. Mm-hmm. So it may seem more expensive, but when you mentioned this right as we started the interview, when you're buying $1 million properties,
right,
and you're investing other people's money to do that as well as your own, you want to have really, really good information.
That's right.
And if you've never done it before, you've never done it before. I mean, I spent years working on a team, learning from someone else's experiences before I started selling on my own, and before I started advising clients. And so those mentors, whether formal or informal, are huge.
Yeah.
One of our prior guests, Josh Steck, asked this question, and it's become a question that I want to use in almost every one of our podcasts. It's around the topic of legacy. What type of legacy do you intend to leave here, both in Denver real estate investing, but as well as with the people you interact with?
For me, I discovered by accident that I had a passion for real estate investing, but I also have a passion for education, which is why I give so much information away on my website. It's all training about investing in apartment buildings specifically, but I talk about psychology and all of that. For me, my legacy I would like to see is that I work with clients who have dreams and they have goals and visions for what they want to do with their lives, and that maybe leave something for their family, whatever their goals are. Through what I've chosen to do in addition to the investing, I'm in such a great position to influence and have a positive impact on so many people, their dreams, and help them determine if their visions if they're on the right course with that or not, and kind of do some course correcting. And then on the other,
reminding them of what their dream was
that's right,
they originally established, because people get off track.
That's right. Persistence is key.
Yeah.
I mean, it is key in real estate, because deals they're not the low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
You have to be persistent. So you're so right about that.
Yeah. And I love this topic of intersecting with someone where they are and helping be that wise sage that comes along and says, here's how we get to there. And that legacy component, as you talk about being an author and writing things on your website, I recently listened to a podcast where an author was talking about why he started writing. And his whole reason for writing is like, at some point I had to quiet that inner voice that was inside of me that was constantly wanting to get things out into the market. And that's very, very much the reason why I started doing this podcast. I mean, we talk about the show is designed to share the stories of investors,
Mm-hmm.
but not only that, it's to help real estate investing become more approachable to the masses. Because I think a lot of people think that real estate investing is all about big institutions and real estate investment trusts and these big corporate, but it's everyday, mom and pop, people that want to buy just a single family home or a duplex or a 5 or 10 unit building and invest in that for their own retirement, for their own legacy that they're going to pass along to their kids. I mean, it's a wonderful business, and the ability for you to walk alongside people and help them with that, I think, has got to be very rewarding for you as well.
It is, and I love your story about having the author who had just to get that out.
Yeah.
I can relate to that feeling.
Quieting the voice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So I believe that leaders are readers. We've talked about the fact that you've written a book, and what I feel about nonfiction books is that we all got an education in high school. Some of us even went to college and paid for a formal education, but what you can do to intentionally educate yourself after college, I think, is what makes you a leader and a successful person in business. So let's talk about your book. You've written the book on apartment investing, and what was that process like? How long did it take? And how I think a lot of people are thinking, gosh, I'd like to write a book, but they never do. And so you've done it. What were some stories and some things that you felt like from writing a book?
It almost didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
Well, I wrote the first 3 chapters. I labored over them, and it was painful. It was not fun. It was just, I was so professorial in my head, and I kept finding myself thinking, I can't wait to tell this story, and I cannot wait to tell this story. But I was being not that person. I was being an author, I thought, really training. And so with much agonizing, I decided to just throw all that away.
Really?
And yes, and it wasn't easy, but I sat down and wrote down the 50 stories I wanted to tell about my experiences as an apartment investor. Things that I thought would really impart some good knowledge and help people learn from my mistakes, etc.
And it'd be relatable,
Relatable, totally. People remember stories.
Yes.
So I took those 50 items and categorized them by topic, and they became my chapters, like magic, and the book wrote itself. Because then I was telling those stories I wanted to tell. And so it was just a pleasure to write. I enjoyed it, and most people tell me it's an easy read. As a result, I think they forget they're even learning.
Right. It sounds like they're interrupting a conversation. They're hearing about your stories, and they're having this ability to just hear what the business is about, instead of, there's so many people that talk about statistics and the structure of things, and it becomes really, really dry and boring. And so I think I can't imagine what it would take, the commitment where you'd say, you know what, I know that I wrote some things that were good here, but it just isn't working, and I'm going to take a new path. And that's probably why when people read it, they say, this is a great book. You shared a quote that I'd like to repeat for everybody, and your quote is, "Luck is what happens when opportunity meets preparation." So talk about that quote. You said it's one of your favorite quotes. How did you come about that quote, and also what does it mean to you?
Well, to me it means that you create your own luck. And it's never a good thing to say, well, he or she was just lucky. First of all, you don't know their story, so you shouldn't go there anyway, right?
Yeah.
But in real estate, it's so critical to be prepared via education, mentorship, hanging out in associations or rubbing elbows with other investors. All of that you gather as preparation. It's not just education, but it's also that clarity of desire, a commitment to persistence, all of those great things, such as Napoleon Hill talks about in his Think and Grow Rich, including intention of what you're going to do. So that's the preparedness side. So luck happens when opportunity meets preparation. By being in that preparation point, you're now in a point to recognize opportunity, and that's key in real estate.
So it's a great segue to my last question, which I love because there's so many people that watch this show that are looking at investing in real estate for the first time. So what advice would you give? And you give a lot of advice to first-time investors. What advice would you give to a first-time investor? Probably about opportunity and preparation, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Learn as much as you can and get out in the streets. This is the first thing I say. To me, with my clients, and I did the very same thing, is I drove around and looked at all the buildings and pictured myself owning them. So what would that mean? Oh my gosh, now I own this 3-story, 50-unit apartment building. What does that mean to me? Who works for me? Who are my tenants? What does the property look like? Does it need work? So that would be one.
Visualize, yeah.
Visualize,
yeah.
See yourself there. But as a side benefit or plus of that, you're actually exploring your markets. So it's forcing you to look at the buildings and look at the neighborhoods and look at the upkeep of areas. So it really helps you investigate markets.
That's a great point. I was on the phone literally 2 days ago with one of our prior guests. His name is Darren Schmidt. And Darren is a developer here in Denver, and he, without any prompting, was just talking to me about what he calls his 10-block walk. And I said, what's that? And he goes, anytime I do a development, whether we're in due diligence or we've actually closed on it, I'll go to the property once a week and walk 10 blocks in an opposite direction from the time before. Because you find so much about a community, both the actual city that you're in as well as the actual community, when you walk it. And I remember when I started helping people buy and sell apartment buildings, I said, I gotta know these neighborhoods. And you don't do it by car, by bike, you do it by walking.
That is such
and
great
studying
advice.
And surveying your market. So what's your advice? I mean, I just touched on it.
No, but I love the 10-block block.
Yeah.
That is such a
cool.
I'm going to use that again. I mean, that's really great.
Good.
The other thing I would really recommend is that people get their feet wet.
Yes.
If you're not sure that this is for you, buy a rental and rent it and do that for a couple of years. It'll help you set the tone in your mind that this doesn't happen overnight anyway. So many people want to do it now. You may discover you have an amazing passion that you didn't know, or you may decide this is not for me.
So Theresa, before we close the show, you've got a great website. We've talked about it. What's your website's name? How do people find you?
TheresaBradley-Banta.com.
Okay.
That's
And then you're on Facebook and Twitter and
Yep.
LinkedIn. So Theresa Bradley hyphenated Banta.
There's no hyphen.
Oh, no hyphen. Okay.
Nope. Yep.
Well, that I learned something then. So that's great to know. And then I get a gift for all of my guests. And we didn't talk about this, but I got a gift for you. I got the book EntreLeadership, which is one of my favorite business books. And when we were prepping for the show, we talked about a marketing funnel and how people go through that. That's in this book. So you're going to actually see that.
Thank you,
so,
Kyle.
well, you're very welcome. And so I was commenting about the book, and Theresa was like, wow, that was a great message, and it's directly from this book. I've actually met Dave Ramsey. I spent a week in his office in Nashville, Tennessee last November at what's called the EntreLeadership Master Series, which is a long event, and I learned so much from their organization.
Oh, thank you.
A lot of the topics they talk about is in this book, so you should enjoy it.
Thank you. I have a surprise for you.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So there's a copy of my book.
The book? Invest in apartment buildings. I love it. Will you sign it for me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'd love that. Thank you so much. I didn't know if you bring a copy. That's so awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so while Theresa's signing the book, I would like to say thank you, give a shout out to some of our frequent watchers. You know who you are out there, but I'm going to call you out by name. Jackie and Chris Hahn, thank you for watching the show. And Chauncey Adams out of Gaithersburg, Maryland, thank you for watching the show. So for my guest, Theresa Bradley-Banta, we'd love to say we will see you around the neighborhood.